Is going to go to Representative Laughlin. The mayor has suggested through some of the things he said in his campaign commercials that you're a neocon and that you're essentially out for my mom's Social Security, that you want to take it away. What's your response to that?
Sure. That's extremely unfortunate, and certainly the facts belie the mayor's comments. I mean, I've built a reputation for being a legislator who can work across party lines, and I'm happy to give you an example of that. Earlier, or actually last year, I had a constituent contact me about a dangerous loophole that existed in Megan's Law. And I worked across party lines to ensure that that loophole was closed, to make sure that registered sex offenders were able to...
I'm asking about Social Security.
Right, and I'm trying to give you an example of being able to work across party lines. You know, I think that in terms of Social Security, obviously I've been very clear that I support Social Security. I think Social Security is got to be maintained for our seniors. But I think it's shameful, frankly, the campaign that the mayor has run, scaring seniors. And I had an 84-year-old gentleman approach me and say that he said, David Cicilline told me you want to take my Social Security and put it in a 401k. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And it's not the way campaigns should run, and it's not what I think the voters deserve.
Mayor Cicilline.
Yeah, well, there's no question. Representative Laughlin voted against a resolution urging Congress not to privatize Social Security. He was one of only 7 members of the House who did that. He's openly talked about privatizing Social Security, about taking the wages of younger workers out of the Social Security system into private stock accounts. He acknowledged that last night. That's exactly what President Bush proposed when the Republicans started this conversation last time about privatizing Social Security. And he's called Social Security a Ponzi scheme. So there is no question that he is advocating privatizing the system. Now, he'll say, oh, well, only part of it. Younger workers who contribute to Social Security are in part supporting the system for people who are currently collecting it. That is privatizing. It's wrong. Social Security is a promise we made 75 years ago. We should not privatize it. We should strengthen the system and protect the promise we made to our seniors.
I saw the clip. As you said, you used the word Ponzi scheme, Representative Laughlin.
I did. And, you know, again, I want to make absolutely clear that I believe that we need to protect Social Security for our seniors. We need to make sure that it's available. I've been committed to that. I've said that publicly, and I've been very strong on that. But let's face it, with a $13 trillion budget, literally spending money we don't have and borrowing money we can never afford to pay back, Washington has become a Ponzi scheme. And it's time that we stop this spending, and it's time we get our country back on track, because that's the only way we're going to grow jobs in this economy.
Thank you. For my colleague Jim Hummel, a question for Mayor Cicilline. Jim?
Mayor, you're both a congressional candidate and the mayor of Providence. I know you like to look ahead, but you have things to deal with the city right now. So I want to touch on 2 issues, budget and the pensions that you talked about in last night's debate. About 6 weeks ago, there was much hand-wringing in your administration because there was concern that your city may not be able to make its payroll. You were waiting for a payment from the state of Rhode Island. You have drawn on reserves from the sale of the Civic Center and others, in effect, to plug that hole. And your critics have said you're doing everything you can to play out the string and get beyond Election Day, and then this crisis is going to hit. So I have 2 questions for you. Part of that is because you have still not made pension payments. The city made one just this week of $10 million, and that again has put you in a tough cash flow situation. My question is, 1, are you being honest with the voters saying that you have fully funded the pensions when you are behind on last year's payments? And 2, are we going to see 2 weeks from now after the election, whether you get elected or not, that Providence is going to have a hard time making its payroll?
No, Providence has never had a hard time making its payroll. One of the things I'm most proud of is the work that we've done to restore fiscal integrity to the city. I've been mayor of the city for 8 years, and we will balance budgets for 8 of those years. Even in the most difficult economic times we've faced since the Great Depression, where the state cut $152 million from cities and towns. The legislature that Representative Laughlin was a part of cut $152 million from the city of Providence over the last 5 years, cut $41 million. Even in that context, we have maintained A ratings from our rating agencies, and that's an evaluation by experts on the financial condition of the city, not by political opponents or adversaries.
Did your finance people talk to you about a cash flow problem? Have they said that to you?
We have always had a...
Have they?
No, we have always made payments, and we have always, of course, relied in part on the state contribution that goes to cities and towns. That's always a challenge. At the beginning of a tax year, when the tax bills go out, that's a reality. But we've built up our reserve. We've maintained A ratings. We've, of course, always met payroll. There is no danger we will not be...
What about the $68 million reserve that you have drawn on on, in effect,
And
to
we
plug
have
that
made
hole.
we made a decision during the budgeting process that we would use some of our rainy day fund in order to avoid a tax
How
increase.
much is left?
And I thought that was may I finish? I think that is an appropriate thing to do, to make sure the taxpayers of the city don't have an additional tax increase, to compensate for some of the cuts the state made. We made cuts in personnel. We made increased copays on health insurance. We imposed furlough days. We did some things, but I did not believe that in addition to that, we should visit upon the taxpayers of the city, despite what the state did, another tax increase. So we used some of our reserve. We did that intentionally, and we built up the reserve for that purpose. But the best assessment of the financial condition of the city are rating agencies, which continue to give Providence A ratings. I'm proud of the work we've done to restore fiscal integrity. I will leave this city in very good condition to the next mayor of the city. We face challenges like every other local community in a very difficult budget year, in very difficult financial times. We've done it as a result of good management and a lot of hard work. We've been able to
stop
do
you
this
there, Mayor.
well.
Thank you. Representative Laughlin.
He just said he's proud of the fiscal integrity of Providence. In the words of Anthony Gemma, are you kidding me? $70 million deficit left for the next mayor to deal with. Unfunded pension liability that under his watch went from $300 million to $1.2 billion left for the next mayor to deal with. Gave away the store to the firefighters and left the mayor to do that, or left the next mayor to deal with that. Increases in taxes. And the condition of that city is deplorable. Drive through Providence. Look with your own eyes. You'll see graffiti-covered buildings. You'll see potholes everywhere. Proud of the fiscal integrity of Providence. I hear from vendors constantly calling me saying that the city is behind on payments to vendors.
It's a little hard to take when John Laughlin was part of the General Assembly that cut 152.
And I voted against that
John,
budget.
John, let him answer.
Who was ineffective in stopping it, whether he voted against it or not. He didn't. His voice was obviously not heard in the General Assembly. $152 million that was cut. Cities and towns were forced to absorb because the General Assembly imposed those cuts over the last 5 years. $41 million in the city of Providence. But despite that, as a result of a lot of hard work in getting more done with less and making real cuts in enacting pension reform, in reducing personnel, we have been able to absorb that. So it's sort of a little hard to take.
Thanks, Mayor Cicilline.
And it's also
Thank
hard.
you. I'm going to turn to Arlene. Thank you. Arlene Violet, a question for John Laughlin, please.
Mr. Laughlin, you, like many Republicans, have certainly embraced curbing business taxes. Yet last week, one of the most extensive studies ever done by anyone, the University of Massachusetts, issued a report that talked about the fact that there's virtually no impact on jobs by business cuts. In light of the findings of that report, would you, certainly scale back the mantra of we need to cut business taxes in order to stimulate jobs? And secondly, sir, relative to personal income tax, why are you championing that people over $500,000 as a couple should continue to get tax breaks? A $500,000 couple net income probably started off at $750,000 to $800,000 by the time they already employed all the tax breaks in the code. So why are you a champion of both those issues, and would you change your mind in light of the findings of UMass?
Well, I think that economists across the spectrum, even economists in the Obama administration, agreed that it's absolutely the wrong thing to do to raise taxes in the middle of a recession and raise taxes on anyone.
No, the question was cut business taxes. I'm not asking about raising.
Right,
it's
but what my opponent
taxes.
favors is increasing taxes and allowing the 2001, 2003 tax cuts to expire, and that would have a negative effect. We've seen, prosperity come in 1961 when John F. Kennedy cut taxes. We were able to grow an economy through the 60s. It happened again in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan cut taxes.
The report addressed that and indicated that in analyzing that, it was because there was investment in infrastructure and vocational training, et cetera, and that's really was the cause.
I meet with business owners. I meet with business owners across
happened.
the district every week, every day practically, and none of them tell me that they're paying too little taxes. They all tell me that one of the reasons that they're unable to grow jobs is because of the tax burdens that they feel. The report from UMass notwithstanding, I think it's clearly demonstrated that we need to reduce the tax burden on business to grow our economy, to grow jobs, and to get us out of this recession, and not have government pick winners and losers with stimulus.
Mayor Cicilline.
I think the study is an important one, and the truth of the matter is I think we absolutely have to be sure that we make the tax cuts for the middle class permanent. I think that it is not the time to add $700 billion to the deficit by giving another tax break to millionaires and billionaires. which is exactly what that amount would be if that tax break continues. Interestingly, 93% of the Rhode Island corporations pay only the corporate minimum tax of $500. So this notion that corporations are all paying too much money is simply not true. The study, I think, makes a very conclusive case that that's not how we create job growth. We create job growth by making sure the middle class gets to hold on to their money, and not by giving more tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires.
Representative Laughlin?
Yeah, again, it's absolute folly to raise taxes, and I can't find a business in Rhode Island, and I would challenge anyone in this room to find a business in Rhode Island that thinks they don't pay enough taxes, that they need to pay more taxes. And you mentioned the $500 tax. That's a tax on businesses whether you make a profit or not. That's money that you have to spend regardless. And so it's not just a Rhode Island problem, and it is a Rhode Island problem. It's also a national problem. And we need to make sure that we reduce our tax burden to make our businesses more competitive, both here and globally. Internationally, we have the second highest corporate tax rate in the world at 39%.
Thank you, Representative.